How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A video. So like any other video, if you want a chance at one of your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below and I'll either answer that question right on your comment or I'll make a video directly related to that in one of the weeks coming up, or I'll answer it in next week's Q&A. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week. And what are my thoughts on the Acura ILX with a 2.4 and a 8-speed DCT? Now, obviously, I don't work on many of these vehicles, but the one I have worked on have been pretty reliable. We know the 2.4 that comes in them is a reliable engine, and the 8-speed DCT transmission is also a favorite of anyone that I have spoken to in the past, especially Acura technicians. I speak to a few different technicians, across the country and actually North America, and nobody really has anything bad to say about either the K24 or the 8-speed transmission. Now, I'm sure there are some issues with them, like anything else, in the world. There is going to be some failures, although no news is good news, as I like to say. So if we don't really hear anything bad about it, that means that typically it's been reliable and well accepted by the community and the drivers and the consumers, etc. So if you're in the market for one of these cars, I think they're great cars. Obviously, they never really sold like Acura had, probably hoped they did. And that's why they switched back to the Integra name that was very famous back in, the 90s and early 2000s. And then they switched it up a couple different times. But essentially, it is what replaced the ILX. And it's essentially the same car, just with an Integra nameplate now. So again, I don't think people really gave it a fair shot. It is just a nicer Civic at the end of the day, but it has some features that the Civic did not, including the 8-speed DCT, which was a lot better option than anything that came in the same generation Civic, with the exception of the 6-speed, which was also offered in the ILX. So again, if you're in the market for one of these cars, I would definitely buy with confidence. If you have one and you've had any issues, or if you haven't had any issues, make sure you drop a comment down below so we can just share some thoughts, and if anyone is interested in, in the market possibly for one, they could relate to that comment and just spread the information as much as possible. So hopefully that answers the question for you. Next question is, what are my thoughts on high mileage oil and oil changes? Now, personally, I would just stick to your regular conventional oil that you've been using, or if been using synthetic oil, then stick to that. Whatever you've been using for the life of the vehicle, just stick to that. I don't really think high mileage oil really has anything special in it. I would just stick to, 3,000 to 5,000 mile oil changes and use whatever you've been using for the life of the vehicle. Don't go and try and changing grades or anything like that either. Use what's recommended from the factory or the manufacturer at that point. And I just would check it more often. Obviously, especially if you bought the car used, there's this possibility that maybe the previous owner didn't do the oil changes as needed, and could cause some sticking rings and oil consumption issues. So obviously, check your oil, do your due diligence, 3,000 to 5,000 miles. Don't get anything past 5,000 miles, and I think you should be okay. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So this next question is, what are my thoughts on Aisin timing belt kits? And you may or may not know this, but Aisin makes some timing belt components for Honda. And I have used both, obviously, the Honda OEM parts made by Aisin and Aisin aftermarket parts. And although they make both parts, there's definitely a quality difference. And this happens a lot, not just with Aisin, but other brands that may make parts for manufacturers. But if you buy it, their brand outside of the manufacturer name, the quality is always a little bit inferior, at least in the situations that I've seen. So just an example, the finishes might not be as nice. And the Aisin timing belt, the water pump will always look a little bit rougher than the Honda water pump. Just one example. And if you're doing anything timing belt or timing chain component, do yourself a favor, do OEM only. You don't want to have one of those parts fail internally and causing catastrophic damage. It's simply not worth saving a couple bucks, even if it's a couple $100, that obviously you're gonna have to repay for labor and pay for any damage that was caused, along with a new OEM part. So I know a lot of times these timing belt kits come with all, the temperature, timing belt, dry belt, water pump, pulleys, and all that stuff. The only thing you need when doing timing belt on a Honda specifically, we'll stick to the J series here, is going to be the water pump, the timing belt, the dry belt, and the timing belt tensioner. Unless if the tensioner was knocking and damaged the pulley where it pushes tension onto the belt. Sometimes those need replacement, but 99 out of 100 times it will not need replacement. And those bearings never fail. I have literally seen zero fail, in a situation where they seized or anything like that. With the exception, again, if the tensioner was faulty and causing a knocking on the tensioner pulley, and then obviously made an indentation. But outside of that, zero bearing failures on either that pulley or the idler pulley directly across from it. Again, I know these kits come with it, but they're completely unnecessary. And I would just, once again, stick to OEM stuff. You don't want to cheap out on a couple of parts and end up causing you more damage. Although I will say, if you will do a aftermarket timing belt kit, Aisin is the one to get for Honda vehicles. So once again, I have used them and I haven't had any issues with them like other companies I have had some issues with. But if you're going to use any aftermarket ones, that would probably be my number one choice. But once again, stick with OEM parts as much as possible. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So this next question is, what happened to a lane watch? So if you're not sure what a lane watch is, it was the camera that was offered on the passenger side of the vehicle on some Hondas for a brief period. Now, once you switched on the passenger blinker, it would display what you were seeing via a camera on your infotainment system or your radio screen. And it was a really, really nice feature that I actually had on a couple cars that I owned at the time. So I'm not sure why they did away with that. I guess maybe the blind spot system is a little bit more efficient, or whatever the case may be. It was a really nice feature. And once again, I don't know what happened. I don't know if maybe people got discouraged with having to replace the mirrors, and at that point when they were in an accident or something like that, and it was expensive, or if Honda just decided to can the whole idea and just offer blind spot. In that situation, it covered both sides of the car versus just the passenger side. So once again, I personally love the feature. Everyone that I know had one of those vehicles with that system also loved the feature and were disappointed once they went away with it. I'll say one more thing. The blind spot system on Hondas, some of them is on the mirror. Some of them is on, by the A-pillar on the door or on the A-pillar itself. And like on my TLX, actually, as well as my Pilot. And I don't like that placement. I'm not looking there. I'm looking at the mirror when I'm switching lanes. So I will say that. I think that's just a bad design overall, and should be on a mirror glass or somewhere on a mirror like other manufacturers do. So once again, not sure why they did away with it. Might have been for a cost, on their end, or customers complaining that the mirror was expensive. With the additional programming, once they smacked it or got smacked or broken or whatever case may be, and it was just really expensive for the customer to repair at that point. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so last question of the week. And once again, if you want a chance to win your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below. And the question is, what are my thoughts on Honda introducing multi-port injection? If you're not sure what that is, it's a combination of direct injection and port injection, which some manufacturers do. I know Toyota's big on this. And that definitely helps clean the intake valves and reduce carbon buildup on them, which I think is a phenomenal idea. Being that we're so late into the ICE engine game, and all these manufacturers are really focusing on EV with the introduction of Honda, specifically with the ZDX and the Prologue, I don't believe Honda will introduce it at this point. Although hopefully I'm wrong. It would be nice to see some even as these engines do phase out And once again, I think it will definitely help a lot of carbon buildup, which I'm gonna have a video on that. I know you guys been asking about that, so I'm definitely gonna be trying to make that as soon as possible. Don't know when, but hopefully soon. So once again, I don't think it's gonna happen, although I think it would be very helpful with some of the carbon buildup that we are seeing on these engines, and some carbon buildup on the injectors as well. So once again, I'm not sure if it's gonna happen, but I do think it would definitely help these engines. So Toyota does a great job of this. Honda decided against it for now. They did change some stuff up on a J Series engine, making a quad cam versus just a single cam on each head. So I'm not sure. I think that would have been probably the right time to introduce it at that point, as well as all the L Series engines and all those engines that they offer, as well as the K Series on the Integras and the Civic Type R's Type S. So once again, I don't think it's going to happen, although I would be 100% for it. I know it complicates stuff a little bit, but overall for the consumer, I think it would be great. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully I answered all your questions, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.